The modern world has a funny little trick. It looks at Christianity and says, how arrogant, how narrow, how can one religion claim to speak to the whole world? And then 5 minutes later, the same modern world walks into every nation, every school, every family, every church, every home, and every child's bedroom and says, you will obey our view of morality, sexuality, justice, truth, history, gender, power, language, and reality. Apparently, universal truth claims are bad unless they come from people with pronouns in their email signature. Christianity says Jesus Christ is Lord. Modernity says that's too narrow. Then modernity says everybody on earth must bow to whatever we decided last Thursday. And somehow, that is enlightenment to them. That is the trick that Chesterton catches in this section that we're going to read today. He catches the critic changing costumes in the middle of the argument. 1 minute, the modern critic says, all humanity has always shared one great moral wisdom. Christianity is not special. The next minute, he says, all humanity was trapped in darkness and superstition until modern progress arrived. Well, which is it? Were the ancients our wise moral brothers, or were they ignorant savages? Were the nations full of conscience, or were they dying, floundering in the dark? Chesterton notices something devastating. The answer changes, depending on which answer is most useful for attacking Christianity that day. That is not honest thought. That is not honest wisdom. That is not honest philosophy. That is man looking for any stick good enough to beat Christ with, even if he has to rip the leg off his own chair to do it. Welcome to the Midweek Refuel, where we seek out the ancient traditions, simply because modern wisdom is currently busy telling us that all cultures are equally wise. Well, right up until one of them builds an altar, honors fathers, believes in God, believes boys should, act like boys, or say maybe civilization should not be run by emotionally unstable people with TikTok accounts and theology degrees from the University of Vibes. Before we get into Chesterton, do me a favor, like and subscribe and share this with anyone who needs a little ancient sanity before modern wisdom finishes eating through the floorboards. That small click helps push this past the fog and into the hands of tired, confused, and spiritually hungry people. So if this does strengthen you, help us strengthen somebody else. And tonight, we are going to be continuing through G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, Chapter 6, The Paradoxes of Christianity, and we are calling this section 6E. And the central issue tonight is one of the oldest objections to Christianity that there are, but also one of the most modern. The objection is this: how can Christianity be the truth for the whole world if it is one religion that came through one people in one place at one time? It's not a silly objection. Chesterton does not treat it like a silly objection. He says it is the one real objection to the faith. The world is big. People are different. Cultures are different. Languages are different. Histories are different. So how can one faith, born in Palestine, fulfilled in Jesus Christ, carried through Israel and the church, speak to all men everywhere? That is the question. And Chesterton, his answer is not cheap. He does not say, well, everybody outside Christianity is just stupid. That is not Chesterton's argument. Chesterton actually admits something very important. He says that there really is a brotherhood of all men in the possession of a moral sense. In other words, conscience is real. The moral law is real. Man is made in the image of God. There's a kind of There's a kind of moral grammar written into the human soul. That is why you can go across cultures and find people who know that murder is wrong, theft is wrong, betrayal is wrong, cowardice is shameful, truth matters, children should be protected, and justice is not optional. You may find that law twisted, you may find conscience wounded, you may find sin corrupting the entire thing. But you will not find man as a mere beast. You'll find man haunted by morality. And that matters. It matters deeply. Confucius can know that stealing is wrong. A pagan can know that boys should tell the truth. A Roman Stoic can speak nobly about duty. A mother in a tribe that never heard the name of Moses can still know that her child should not lie to her. Christianity does not deny that. It doesn't deny those truths. Christianity explains it. The existence of moral truth outside of the visible boundaries of the church is not an argument against Christianity. Man has conscience because man is not an accident. Man has moral knowledge because man is not merely a clever little animal. Man knows something of the law because the lawgiver made us. But here is where Chesterton turns the knife. The modern critic loves universal human conscience when it can be used to attack Christianity. He says, you see, morals unite everyone. Creeds divide people. We do not need Christianity. We already have universal ethics. Sounds very noble, sounds very broad-minded, sounds tolerant, doesn't it? But then Chesterton says, wait a minute. If you are going to appeal to the universal customs of mankind, then why do you only count the customs that you like? Because one of the most universal customs of mankind is not just morality, it is worship, it is altar, it is sacrifice, it is ritual, it is sacred space, it is priesthood, it is prayer. It is the sense that man stands before powers greater than himself. It is the sense that the world is not merely a machine, that death is not merely biology, that sin is not merely social inconvenience, that the heavens declare something, that blood means something, that covenant means something, that the holy is real. Modern man says all peoples have moral wisdom. Fine. Then all peoples also have religious hunger. Modern man says, listen to the ancient conscience. Fine. Then listen when that ancient conscience builds an altar for you. Listen when it offers sacrifice. Listen to it when it bows. Listen to it when it trembles. Listen to it when it says that there is a God. But modernity does not want to listen to mankind. It wants to edit mankind. It wants Confucius saying, do not steal. It does not want Abraham building an altar. It wants little boys should tell the truth. It does not want the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It wants conscience without covenant, morality without worship, and commandments without the commander, fruit without root. And that is why the modern world is so morally loud and so spiritually empty. It still wants to scold like Moses, but it does not want to meet the God of Moses. It wants commandments carved in stone, absolutely, but only after it has smashed the tablets and appointed itself the new mountain. That is Chesterton's accusation. The critics say Christianity is narrow because it came through one people. But then that same critic says science and progress came through one people, and thank God they did because everybody else was in darkness. Do you see the hypocrisy? If Christianity says the light came into the world through Israel and through Christ, the critic says, well, how arrogant. But if modern secular progress says the light came into the world through enlightened modern Europe and its intellectual descendants, well, the critic says, how wonderful. So the objection is not really to particularity. The objection is not really to one truth for all men. The objection is not really to a message that begins in one place and goes to the nations. The objection is to Christ. Because modernity has its own universal gospel. I don't know if you've noticed or not. It has its own missionaries. It has its own priests. It has its own catechisms. It has its own heresy trials. It has its own excommunications. It has its own sacraments. It has its own flag. It has its own holy month. It has its own saints. It has its own devils. It has its own original sin. It has its own eschatology. It has its own day of judgment. And it absolutely intends to disciple the nations. Do not let anyone tell you that the modern world does not believe in universal truth. It does. It just hates the true universal truth. It does not object to lordship. It objects to Jesus being Lord. It does not object to moral authority. It objects to God having moral authority. It does not object to evangelism. It objects to evangelism that calls men to repentance instead of affirmation. It does not object to missionaries. It objects to missionaries with Bibles. It does not object to conversion. It objects to conversion to Christ. The world will call Christianity narrow, while demanding that every baker, every teacher, every nurse, every parent, pastor, child, church, nation, and civilization bow before the latest moral theory invented by people who cannot define a woman without breaking into a cold sweat. That is not broad-mindedness. That is empire. That is not humility. That is a counterfeit kingdom. And this is where Chesterton is so very useful to us, because he teaches us to ask better questions. A lot of Christians get intimidated the moment the accusation is made. You Christians are narrow. You Christians are arrogant. You Christians think you have the truth. You Christians think everyone else is wrong. And many believers immediately start apologizing for the faith before they have even understood the trick. Chesterton teaches us to stop and ask, does the accuser live by his own standard? Does he actually reject all universal truth claims? Does he actually believe no single moral vision should be pressed upon the world? Does he actually believe every culture should be left alone? I don't think so. Does he actually believe all ancient wisdom should be respected? No, of course not. The modern critic does not believe that no one should claim universal truth. He believes Christians should not claim universal truth. He does not believe no one should shape the children. He believes Christians should not shape the children. He does not believe that no one should evangelize. He believes Christians should not evangelize. He does not believe no one should legislate morality. He believes Christian morality should not be legislated. He does not believe religion should stay out of public life. He believes our religion should stay out of public life so his religion can rule public life unchallenged. That, my friend, is the trick. And young men especially need to learn this. Do not be emotionally bullied by accusations. Do not be stampeded by the daily slogans. Do not let a man call you narrow while he is trying to shove all mankind through the keyhole of his particular ideology. Ask him what standard he is using. Ask him whether he applies that standard to himself. Ask him whether he is really against universal truth or whether he is only against Christ being the universal truth. Because Christianity is particular. Yeah, it came through Israel. It came through Abraham. It came through Moses. It came through David. It came through Mary. It came through Bethlehem. It came through Nazareth. It came through Galilee. It came through Calvary. It came through an empty tomb outside of Jerusalem. It came through apostles with names. It came through blood, sweat, tears, dust, wood, nails, Roman soldiers, Jewish priests, frightened disciples, and women at a tomb. Christianity is not an abstraction. It is not a motivational poster. It is not a mist of spiritual feelings. It is not be nice and recycle. It is not follow your heart, thank God, because your heart is a lunatic. And if you follow it long enough, it will lead you into a ditch. Call the ditch your truth and then demand that everyone else affirm the ditch. Christianity is not vague. Christianity is incarnate. God did not save the world by sending an idea to us. He sent his Son to us. The Word became flesh, and flesh is particular. A real body is particular. A real cross is particular. A real crown of thorns is very particular. A real resurrection is particular. A real king has a real name, and that name is Jesus. So yes, Christianity is one religion because there is one Lord. Yes, Christianity is one way because Christ says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Yes, Christianity is one faith because there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. The world thinks that is narrow, but the world is wrong. A doorway is narrow, but it opens into a house. A birth canal is narrow, but it brings a child into the world. A road can be narrow and still be the only road that does not end over a cliff. Truth is not false because it is narrow. A key is narrow. But if it opens the lock, well, then it happens to be the right key. Chesterton has been saying exactly that in this whole chapter. Christianity fits the lock. It fits the strange shape of the reality you are in. It fits man's moral conscience. It fits man's religious hunger. It fits the dignity of pagan wisdom and the failure of pagan salvation. It explains why men everywhere know morality and why men everywhere still need mercy. That is the difference between morality and gospel. Morality says, do not steal. The gospel says Christ saves thieves. Morality says, tell the truth. The gospel says Christ is the truth, who forgives liars. Morality says, honor righteousness. The gospel says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Morality can accuse, morality can warn, morality can restrain, morality can shame. Morality can tell you that you are very guilty, but morality cannot bleed for you. Morality cannot rise from the dead for you. Morality cannot make atonement for you. Morality cannot give you a new heart. Morality cannot say, Father, forgive them. Morality cannot say, today you will be with me in paradise. That is why the world's universal conscience does not disprove Christianity. It cries out for Christianity. The conscience of the nations is not a substitute for Jesus Christ. It is a witness that man was made for Christ. The law, written on the heart, does not save the heart. It reveals that the heart needs saving. And that is why Chesterton will not let the modern critic get away with his little tricks and his little games. You cannot say all men have one moral religion when that helps you dismiss Christ, and then say all men were primitive savages when their altars and prayers and sacrifices point back towards God. You cannot say ancient ethics never changed when Epictetus helps your argument, and then say ethics changed completely when Bossuet hurts your argument. You cannot say morality was stable for 2,000 years and then unstable for 200 just because you needed it to be. You cannot say Christianity is provincial because it came through one people and then boast that modern progress came through one enlightened people. That is not reason. That is not fairness. That is not wisdom. That is a rigged courtroom. And Chesterton is calling the bluff. Now, let's hear him say it. I take a third case, the strangest of all, because it involves the one real objection to the faith. The one real objection to the Christian religion is simply that it is one religion. The world is a big place full of very different kinds of people. Christianity, it may reasonably be said, is one thing confined to one kind of people. It began in Palestine. It has practically stopped with Europe. I was duly impressed with this argument in my youth, and I was much drawn towards the doctrine often preached in ethical societies. I mean, the doctrine that there is one great unconscious church of all humanity founded on the omnipresence of the human conscience. Creeds, it was said, divide men, but at least morals unite them. The soul might seek the strangest and most remote lands and ages and still find essential ethical common sense. It might find Confucius under eastern trees, and he would be writing, "Thou shalt not steal." It might decipher the darkest hieroglyphic on the most primeval desert, and the meaning, when deciphered, would be, "Little boys should tell the truth." I believe this doctrine of the brotherhood of all men and the possession of a moral sense, and I believe it still, with other things. And I was thoroughly annoyed with Christianity for suggesting, as I supposed, that whole ages and empires of men had utterly escaped this light of justice and reason. But then I found an astonishing thing. I found that the very people who said that mankind was one church from Plato to Emerson were the very people who said that morality had changed altogether, and that what was right in one age was wrong in another. If I asked, say, for an altar, I was told that we needed none, for men, our brothers, gave us clear oracles and one creed in their universal customs and ideals. But if I mildly pointed out that one of men's universal customs was to have an altar, then my agnostic teachers turned clean round and told me that men had always been in darkness and the superstitions of savages. I found it was their daily taunt against Christianity, that it was the light of one people and had left all others to die in the dark. But I also found that it was their special boast for themselves that science and progress were the discovery of one people and that all other peoples had died in the dark. Their chief insult to Christianity was actually their chief compliment to themselves. And there seemed to be a strange unfairness about all their relative insistence on the two things. When considering some pagan or agnostic, we were to remember that all men had one religion. When considering some mystic or spiritualist, we were only to consider what absurd religions some men had. We could trust the ethics of Epictetus because ethics had never changed. We must not trust the ethics of Bossuet, because ethics had changed. They changed in 200 years, but not in 2000. And there it is. That last line is the blade. They changed in 200 years, but not in 2000. Chesterton saw the trick. The world wanted ancient morality when ancient morality could be used against Christ, but the world rejected ancient religion when ancient religion actually pointed towards Christ. It wanted conscience, but it wanted it without God. Morals without worship, truth without incarnation, law without gospel. But you and I know better. The light in the nations was never meant to replace Jesus Christ. It was meant to prepare men for him. Every true moral insight outside the visible boundaries of the church is not a rival throne. It is a signpost. Every conscience that says, "Do not steal," is whispering that there is justice. Every conscience that says, "Tell the truth," is whispering to you that there is truth. Every altar in the ancient world, however confused it might have been, however darkened, however broken by sin, was still man reaching upward through the smoke, saying, there must be more than this. There must be mercy. There must be a God. And then God came down. Not as an idea, not as a slogan, not as a vague moral principle. He came down in Jesus Christ, my King. One Lord, one cross, one empty tomb, one name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. The world may call that narrow. Let it. A narrow gate is still better than a wide road to hell. A narrow cross is still wide enough to hold the sins of the world. And one risen Jesus is enough Lord for every nation under heaven. Christ is King. Hail to the King.